Veltar pressed his 4 fingers against the cold metal console and stared at the numbers that made no sense. The Deep Space Monitoring Station Kepler-7 had been his home for 12 years, and in all that time he had never seen readings like these. The object moving toward their sector was massive beyond anything in the galactic database. "Sir, the signature is getting stronger," said Crixoth from her station nearby. Her 6 eyes blinked in the pattern that meant worry among her people. "Whatever this thing is, it's slowing down." Veltar walked over to look at her screen. Space debris didn't slow down. Asteroids didn't change course. Ships slowed down. But no ship in the galaxy was this big. "How big are we talking about?" he asked. Crixoth's claws clicked against her keyboard as she ran the numbers again. "If these readings are right, it's over 50 kilometers long. That's impossible, though. The largest ship in the Council fleet is only 8 kilometers. The station's alarm suddenly screamed through the corridors. Red lights flashed everywhere. Emergency protocols kicked in automatically. Veltar had only heard this alarm during drills. "All stations report," he called into his communicator. "Sensor array online," came the first voice. "Communications ready," said another. "Weapon systems." "Sir, our weapons are offline for maintenance," reported the security chief. Veltar felt his stomach drop. Of all the times for their guns to be down, it had to be now. Not that their small defense turrets would do much against something 50 kilometers long. The main screen flickered to life and showed them what was coming. Veltar had seen thousands of ships in his career, but this thing looked like someone had built a metal mountain and taught it to fly. Its hull was black as space itself, and covered in strange patterns that seemed to move when he looked at them too long. Massive engines glowed at the back with a blue light he had never seen before. "Send a message to Galactic Command," Veltar ordered. "Priority 1. Unknown vessel approaching our sector. Size and design unlike anything in our records." As Crixoth sent the message, the strange ship came to a complete stop just outside their scanning range. It hung there in space like a sleeping giant. No movement, no signals, just waiting. "Try to contact them," Veltar said. Crixoth opened all communication channels. "Unknown vessel, this is Kepler-7 monitoring station. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." Silence. She tried again using different frequencies. Still nothing. Hours passed. The ship just sat there. Veltar ordered his crew to take shifts watching it while they waited for orders from command. Nobody could sleep, though. The thing was too big and too strange to ignore. 3 days later, the Ross ship moved. Not toward the station, but toward the nearby Altair system, where 17 billion people lived on 6 different worlds. It moved slowly like it had all the time in the universe. "Sir," Crixoth called out, "it's scanning the planets." On their screens, they could see energy beams sweeping across each world. The scans were detailed and thorough. Someone was learning everything about those planets. Veltar's communicator buzzed. "Kepler-7, this is Fleet Admiral Zeftos. We're bringing the combined armada to your sector. Do not engage the unknown vessel. Repeat, do not engage." "Understood, sir," Veltar replied. "The vessel is currently scanning the Altair system." "We know. Our analysts are studying your data. What we're seeing shouldn't be possible. That ship is made from materials we've never encountered. Its energy output suggests weapons that could destroy planets." Veltar felt cold. The Combined Armada was the most powerful military force in galactic history. Ships from 12 different species working together. If they were worried, everyone should be worried. The massive ship finished scanning the Altair system and moved on to the next one. Then the next. It was systematic and patient, like someone making a grocery list. "Sir," Crixoth said quietly, "I'm picking up movement inside the ship. Lots of movement. There are definitely people in there." "How many people?" "The bioscans suggest millions." Veltar stared at the readings. A ship that big with millions of people wasn't just a warship. It was a city, maybe even a country flying through space. News of the giant ship spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communications could carry it. Every species had the same reaction: fear. In 3,000 years of galactic civilization, nothing like this had ever appeared. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions. Religious leaders preached about the end times. Markets crashed as people stopped buying and started hoarding. On the 5th day, the ship sent its first message. The transmission came on every frequency at once. It was so powerful that even broken radios started working again. Every communication device in the galaxy received it at the same moment. A human voice spoke. "People of the galaxy," the voice said calmly, "we are humanity. We have returned." The message was short, but it changed everything. Humanity had been exiled from the galaxy 500 years ago for being too aggressive, too warlike, too dangerous. The Council had given them old ships and told them to never come back. Now they were back. The human ship moved to the edge of the Altair system and stopped again, waiting. On Kepler 7, Veltar and his crew watched their screens and tried to understand what they were seeing. "Sir," Crixuth whispered, "there are more ships coming." On the long-range scanners, new signatures appeared. Dozens of them, all the same impossible size, all heading toward different parts of the galaxy. Veltar realized that the galaxy was about to change forever. The ship outside his window wasn't just one vessel. It was the beginning of something much bigger, something that had been growing in the dark spaces between stars for 500 years. He opened a channel to Galactic Command. "This is Kepler 7. We need immediate evacuation. All personnel, all civilians in the surrounding systems." "Negative, Kepler 7. Hold your position and continue monitoring." Veltar looked at his crew, good people who had served faithfully for years. They deserved better than to be abandoned here while giants moved through space. "Sir," Crixuth said, pointing at her screen, "the human ship is powering up its weapons." The massive vessel began to glow. Energy readings spiked beyond their instruments' ability to measure. Whatever was about to happen, Veltar knew that the galaxy would never be the same again. The stars themselves seemed to dim as humanity announced its return to a universe that thought it was safe. Fleet Admiral Zeftos had commanded warships for 40 years, but he had never seen a fleet like the one surrounding him now. 847 vessels from 12 different species hung in formation around his flagship. The combined firepower could turn a moon into dust in minutes. Still, he felt afraid. The human ship called Eternal Vigilance waited for them at the edge of the Altair system. Even from 50,000 kilometers away, it looked impossibly huge. His tactical officer had run the numbers 3 times, and they still made no sense. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "incoming message from the human vessel. Put it through." The main screen flickered and showed the bridge of the human ship. A woman sat in the captain's chair. She looked young, but her eyes were old and cold. Behind her, Zeftos could see dozens of crew members working at stations that seemed to be made of light itself. "I am Captain Sora of the human vessel Eternal Vigilance," the woman said. Her voice was calm, like she was ordering dinner. "You have brought an impressive fleet, Admiral." "I am Fleet Admiral Zeftos of the Combined Armada," he replied. "By order of the Galactic Council, you will surrender your vessel and submit to inspection." Sora smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Admiral, you have 2 choices. Turn your ships around and leave this system, or we will remove you." "Captain, you are outnumbered 800 to 1. Your ship may be large, but it's still just one ship." "Admiral," Sora said gently, "you have no idea what you're dealing with. Last chance." The screen went dark. Zeftos looked around his bridge. Every officer was staring at him. The weight of 800 ships and 200,000 lives pressed down on his shoulders. "All ships," he announced, "prepare for battle. Target the human vessel. What happened next would be talked about in whispers for the rest of galactic history. The human ship didn't move. It didn't raise shields or power weapons. It just sat there like a sleeping mountain while 800 warships lined up their guns. "All ships report ready," his tactical officer announced. "Fire." 800 ships opened fire at once. Energy beams, plasma bolts, and fusion missiles streaked across space toward the Eternal Vigilance. Enough firepower to destroy a planet. Lit up the darkness. The weapons hit the human ship and simply vanished. No explosions. No damage. The energy just disappeared like it had never existed. "What the hell?" Zeftos whispered. On the human ship, Captain Sora stood up from her chair. She walked to a console where a young man with calm eyes waited. "Dong-ho," she said quietly. "Minor defensive demonstration." The weapons officer called Dong-ho nodded and pressed a single button. A beam of blue light appeared from the front of the Eternal Vigilance. It was thin as a pencil, but it cut through space, like reality was made of paper. The beam swept across. The combined armada from left to right in exactly 4.7 seconds. 847 warships simply ceased to exist. They didn't explode. They didn't break apart. One moment they were there, and the next moment they were gone. 200,000 of the galaxy's finest warriors turned to atoms in less than 5 seconds. Zeftos had just enough time to understand what was happening. Before his own ship vanished around him, the only thing left in space was the human vessel hanging quietly where it had always been. On the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance, Captain Sora returned to her chair. The crew continued their work like nothing had happened. Dong-ho marked something on his screen and went back to monitoring his instruments. "Communications," Sora said. "Send a message to every government in the galaxy." A young woman named Mi-Jin activated the transmission systems. Her message would reach every world, every station, every ship in civilized space at the same moment. "People of the galaxy," Sora's voice carried across 1,000 light years. "We are humanity. We have returned. The combined armada no longer exists. Any further military action against human vessels will result in the complete destruction of your species. You have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally. This is your only warning." The message ended. Across the galaxy, panic spread like wildfire. The combined armada had been destroyed in seconds by a single ship. Military leaders stared at empty screens where their greatest fleet used to be. Politicians held emergency meetings. That accomplished nothing. Religious figures declared the end of everything. On the human ship, Admiral Hyun-Soo stood beside Captain Sora and watched the long-range scanners. Hundreds of other human vessels were moving into position around major population centers. "Any regrets?" Hyun-Soo asked quietly. Sora looked at him with those cold eyes. "They exiled us to die in the void. They took our worlds and scattered our people. They thought they could forget us." That was 500 years ago. These aren't the same people. But they're the children of the same system, the same governments, the same species that decided humanity was too dangerous to exist. Hyun-Soo nodded. He had been there during the exile. He remembered watching Earth disappear, behind them as their broken fleet limped toward the dark spaces between galaxies. Most of them had expected to die out there. Instead, they had found something worse than death. They had found purpose. "Sir," Mi-Jin called out, "we're receiving surrender offers from 6 different species." "Too late," Sora replied. "They had 72 hours to respond. They used the first hour to attack us. On worlds across the galaxy, people looked up at their skies and wondered if tomorrow would come. Ancient species that had never agreed on anything suddenly found themselves united in terror. The Galactic Council met in emergency session, but what could they do? Their greatest military force had been erased like chalk from a board. Some governments tried to run. They loaded their important people onto fast ships and headed for the galactic rim. But when they got there, more human vessels were waiting. Nowhere was safe. Humanity had spent 500 years preparing for this moment. The human ship Eternal. Vigilance moved deeper into the Altair system. Its scanners swept across each planet, cataloging resources and populations. The people below could only watch as death hung in their sky, patient and unstoppable. Captain Sora walked through the corridors of her ship and visited the millions of people who called it home. Families who had been born in the void, children who had never seen a natural star, scientists who had unlocked secrets that the galaxy thought impossible. They were all here because the galaxy had decided humanity was too dangerous to live among civilized people. Now, they would learn what humanity had become when forced to survive in places where life wasn't meant to exist. "Captain," a voice called over the ship's communication system, "this is Engineer Jin Woo. The resource collectors are ready for deployment." Sora returned to the bridge and looked at the planets spinning peacefully below. Soon they would be spinning around stars that served humanity instead of the species that lived there now. "Begin Phase 2, she ordered. The galaxy had 71 hours left to surrender, but Captain Sora already knew they wouldn't. Pride and fear would make them fight even when fighting was hopeless. That was fine. Humanity had learned patience in the dark. They could wait for the galaxy to understand what it had created when it threw them away like garbage. The stars watched silently as the future of everything began to unfold. The captured data cores from the destroyed fleet told a story the galaxy didn't want to hear. In the emergency chambers of the Galactic Council, representatives from 200 species gathered to listen to what their ancestors had done 500 years ago. Council leader Thexara activated the holographic display with trembling hands. Her species had been part of the original vote to exile humanity. Now she wished her people had never learned to leave their homeworld. "The records are clear," she announced to the packed chamber. 500 years ago, humanity controlled 47 star systems. They were expanding rapidly and had developed new weapons that made other species nervous. The hologram showed images of human colonies. Cities full of people who looked just like the ones now destroying their fleets. Children playing in parks. Families having dinner together. Normal people living normal lives. The council of that time decided humanity was too aggressive for galactic society, Thexara continued. The vote was close, but it passed. Humanity was given 30 days to abandon all their worlds and leave known space forever. Representative Colvin from the warrior caste stood up. They were conquering everything, taking worlds from other species. We had no choice. "The records say different," replied data analyst Yex Oth. "Humans purchased most of their worlds legally. They only fought when attacked first. But their technology was advancing faster than anyone else's, and that scared us." The chamber filled with angry voices. Nobody wanted to admit their ancestors had made a mistake, especially not a mistake that was about to end their civilization. "What happened to them after the exile?" asked someone from the back. Thexara switched to the next set of files. "According to our long-range scouts, the human fleet headed toward the galactic void. We assume they died out there. Space between galaxies is empty and hostile. Nothing can survive there for long." "But they did survive," Yexoth said quietly. "And they didn't just survive. They grew stronger." The hologram showed new images captured from the human ship. Technology that shouldn't exist. Materials that were harder than anything in the galactic database. Weapons that could erase matter from existence. "How?" Colvin demanded. "How did they build all this in empty space?" The answer came from an unexpected source. In the medical bay of a council research station, a very old human woman named Yu Jin lay dying. She had been captured during the original exile and had spent 500 years in galactic prisons. Now she was the only person alive who remembered both times. "You want to know what happened to us out there?" Yu Jin whispered to the scientists around her bed. "We found things in the dark. Old things things that were there before the galaxies formed. Dr. Melthak leaned closer. What kind of things? Entities that exist between dimensions. Machines left behind by species so ancient they forgot their own names. Sources of energy that don't follow your physics. Yujin coughed and blood appeared on her lips. We made deals with them. We learned from them. We became something new. That's impossible, Dr. Melthak said. Yujin smiled with teeth that were too sharp. 500 years ago, you threw us into hell and told us to die. Instead, we made friends with the devils. She died a few minutes later. Her body turned to dust before the doctors could perform an autopsy. Back on the human ship, Eternal Vigilance, Chief Science Officer Wu Bin stood in a laboratory that existed in 7 dimensions at once. Around him, machines hummed with power, drawn from spaces between atoms. The technology they had learned in the void made their exile seem like a gift instead of a punishment. Captain, he said into his communicator, the Council is starting to understand what we became out there. Captain Sora's voice came back instantly. Good. Let them understand. Let them realize what they created when they threw us away. Wu Bin touched a control panel made of crystallized time. The resource collection ships are in position around 300 systems. We can begin harvesting whenever you give the order. Not yet. I want them to know exactly why this is happening. In the ship's historical archives, Scholar Jae Sung prepared the final message that would be sent to every world in the galaxy. He had spent decades collecting the true story of humanity's exile, every vote, every speech, every species that had supported throwing them into the void. The message would include the names of every council member who had voted for exile, their species, their descendants. Everything needed to understand that this wasn't random destruction. This was justice delivered by people who had spent 500 years becoming strong enough to collect it. All recording systems ready, announced Communications Officer Mi Jin. Captain Sora walked to the main transmission chamber. Behind her stood Admiral Hyun Soo and dozens of other humans who had lived through the exile. Their faces showed no anger, no hate, just cold determination. People of the galaxy, Sora began, you are about to learn why we have returned. The message that followed lasted 6 hours. It included historical records, voting documents, and video footage from the exile. Every species learned exactly how their ancestors had participated in throwing humanity into the dark. Some had voted for it. Others had remained silent. A few had even helped build the ships that carried humans away. But the most shocking part came at the end. We could have returned at any time in the last 200 years, Sora explained. Our technology surpassed yours long ago. We chose to wait because we wanted you to build a civilization worth taking. We wanted you to fill the galaxy with resources and people that would serve us when we came home. You spent 5 centuries thinking you were safe, building your worlds, growing your populations, creating art and culture and science that will soon belong to us. Thank you for preparing our inheritance. The message ended with a list. Every species that had participated in the exile, every world they currently controlled, every resource humanity would be claiming as payment for 500 years of exile. The list was longer than anyone expected. On worlds across the galaxy, people realized they weren't facing an invasion. They were facing a collection. Humanity had spent centuries planning how to take everything that had been built since their exile, every advancement, every discovery, every beautiful thing that species had created in their absence. The galaxy had thrown them into the void and told them to die. Instead, they had become something that could never be defeated. Something that had learned to thrive in places where existence itself was hostile. Now they had come home to collect what they were owed, and the bill was everything. The Galactic Council's final meeting lasted only 30 minutes. When it ended, 200 species knew their civilization was over. The humans have rejected our surrender offer, announced Council Leader Thexara to the emergency assembly. They say surrender was only possible before they were attacked. Now they will take everything by force. Representative Colvin slammed his fist on the table. Then we fight. Every species, every ship, every weapon we have. With what? Asked someone from the Merchant Guild. They destroyed our entire fleet with one shot. The ancient weapons, whispered Elder Vixoth from the back of the chamber. In the deep vaults below the council station, weapons from the time before the galaxies were mapped. Everyone turned to look at her. The Elder was older than recorded history. Some said she remembered when the first spacefaring species learned to leave their homeworlds. What weapons? Thexara asked. Devices built by the predecessor species, things that could crack planets and collapse stars. We sealed them away when the council was formed because they were too dangerous to exist. Why didn't you mention this? Before? Elder Vixoth stood slowly. Because using them might destroy everything, the galaxy, the stars, all of us. The humans are going to destroy everything anyway, Colvin pointed out. The decision was made in silence. One by one, the representatives voted to open the deep vaults, to wake weapons that had slept for millions of years, to gamble the existence of everything on one last desperate attack. 3 days later, the ancient weapons emerged from storage for the first time since the galaxy was young. Devices that bent reality into impossible shapes. Machines that could reach across dimensions and tear holes in space itself. Artillery that fired pieces of collapsed stars. But when they were activated against the human fleet, something terrible happened. The weapons simply stopped working. Admiral Yun Su watched the ancient devices malfunction from the bridge of his command ship. Around him, his staff analyzed the failed attacks with interest rather than concern. The predecessor weapons are impressive, he told his science officer Wu Bin. But they operate on principles we learned to counter decades ago. Should we be concerned about anything else they might try? Asked Tactical Officer Bo Ra. No. Their technological development stopped when they exiled us. Ours continued. Hyun Su looked at the tactical display, where 10,000 human ships surrounded every major population center in the galaxy. Begin resource acquisition. What happened next wasn't war. It was harvesting. Human ships descended on inhabited worlds and began systematic extraction of everything useful. Not just metals and minerals, but knowledge, art, and even people. Everything that could serve humanity's expanded empire. The process was efficient and terrible. Advanced machines designed by minds that had learned to think in multiple dimensions simultaneously stripped away everything valuable while leaving the basic infrastructure intact. Populations were relocated to designated areas. Governments were dissolved. Military forces were disarmed and reassigned to human supervision. On the world of Kepler Prime, former Fleet Admiral Zeftos watched human machines dismantle the shipyards where he had once built warships. He had survived the destruction of his fleet because he hadn't been aboard his flagship when it vanished. Now he worked as a mid-level supervisor in his own former command center. The humans are redistributing our population, his assistant reported. Families are being moved to residential sectors they've constructed. Zeftos looked at the reports. The new residential areas were actually quite nice. Better housing than most people had lived in before. Efficient transportation. Advanced. Medical facilities. Everything designed to keep people healthy and productive. They're not trying to hurt us, he realized. They're optimizing us. On the human command ship, Colonial Administrator Kyung Min reviewed the integration reports from 200 worlds. The process was proceeding ahead of schedule. Local populations were adapting to human administration faster than projected. Resistance has been minimal, he reported to Captain Sora during their daily briefing. Most species seem relieved that we're not killing them. Why would we kill them? Sora asked. They're useful. Their knowledge, their cultures, their different ways of thinking about problems, all valuable. Some of the military leaders are having trouble adjusting. Give them real jobs. Put them in charge of maintaining order in their own territories. Former enemies make the best allies once they understand the new reality. Outside the ship's massive windows, the galaxy looked the same as always. But everything had changed. Trade routes now flowed according to human efficiency models. Scientific research followed human priorities. Art and entertainment were subtly adjusted to promote psychological stability under human rule. It was all done with such skill that most people didn't realize how completely their lives had been restructured. They went to work, raised their families, and pursued their interests, much as they always had. They just did it all within a framework designed by humanity. The few resistance movements that formed were crushed before they could act, not by human soldiers, but by predictive systems that identified potential rebels before they even knew they were rebels. People would simply find themselves relocated to different jobs in different places where resistance was impossible. On Earth, now the capital of the Galactic Empire, Fleet Admiral Sun Ho stood in the war room and studied reports from across human space. Thousands of worlds brought into the Empire, billions of people living under human authority, resources flowing toward human development projects that would reshape reality itself. "Any problems?" asked his aide. "None. The integration is proceeding, exactly as planned." Sun Ho touched a control panel, and the display showed the edge of the galaxy. "The last Free Fleet surrendered this morning. Admiral Telrath and his people are being relocated to administrative positions." "What about the species that tried to escape to other galaxies?" "We were already there waiting for them. Remember, we spent 500 years exploring the spaces between galaxies. We know every route, every hiding place, every refuge they might try to reach." The aide nodded. "So it's over?" Sun Ho looked at the vast display showing their new empire. 10,000 human ships maintaining order across a galaxy that had once exiled them. Trillions of people living under human rule, resources and knowledge, flowing toward projects that would make humanity into something beyond current understanding. "No," he said quietly. "It's just beginning." In the residential sectors of former enemy worlds, human children who had been born during the conquest played with alien children who had never known freedom. They learned together, grew up together, and would one day inherit an empire that spanned multiple galaxies. The old galaxy was dead. What remained was something new, something built by humanity, but inhabited by everyone who had learned to accept their place in the new order. And in the deep research facilities hidden throughout human space, scientists worked on projects that would make their current dominance look small. Plans to reshape matter itself. Experiments in time manipulation. Contact with entities from dimensions that existed beyond normal space. Humanity had spent 500 years learning to survive in impossible places. Now they would use that knowledge to become impossible themselves. 1 year after first contact, Governor General He Wan stood on the observation deck of the orbital station above what used to be the Galactic Council homeworld. Below her, the planet spun peacefully in the light of its star, cities full of people, going about their daily lives. None of them remembered that this world had once been the center of galactic government. That was because human memory modification technology had gently adjusted their recollections. Not erased, just edited. The painful parts about losing their independence had been replaced with memories of choosing to join the human empire. People remembered voting for integration. They remembered feeling relieved when humanity arrived to solve their problems. "The psychological integration is complete," reported her aide, a young human named Min Ki who had been born after the conquest. "Population stress levels are within normal parameters across all occupied territories." He Wan nodded. Min Ki had never known a galaxy where humanity wasn't in charge. To him, this was simply how things were supposed to be. Sometimes she envied his innocence. "Any reports from the research divisions?" "Dr. Wubin says the dimensional engineering project is ahead of schedule. The new reality anchors should be ready for testing within 6 months." He Wan turned away from the window. Reality anchors would allow humanity to literally rewrite the laws of physics in local areas, make gravity work differently, change how time flowed, alter the fundamental forces that held matter together. It was the kind of power that gods might have, if gods existed. In the residential sectors below, former council leader Thexara worked as a cultural preservation specialist. Her job was to catalog the art and literature of her people so human scholars could study it. She found the work satisfying in a way that governing had never been. The humans had been very clever about job assignments. Everyone who had once held power now had positions that used their skills but carried no real authority. Former military officers ran security in their home districts. Ex-politicians managed local administration. Previous business leaders organized economic distribution. They were all technically still in charge of their own people. They just did it within guidelines provided by human administrators. Guidelines that ensured everything flowed toward human priorities while maintaining the illusion of local control. The integration protocols are working perfectly, Thexara reported during her monthly review. My people have adapted to the new administrative structure with minimal psychological stress. Her human supervisor, a pleasant woman named Sora, who had once been a starship captain, smiled warmly. I'm glad to hear that. Your expertise has been invaluable in making this transition smooth for everyone. It was true. Thexara's knowledge of her people's customs and psychology had helped design integration programs that felt natural rather than imposed. The humans could have simply forced obedience, but they preferred cooperation. It was more efficient and lasted longer. In the deep research facilities that existed in folded space-time, human scientists worked on projects that would have been impossible before the conquest. Access to the knowledge and perspectives of hundreds of different species had accelerated human development beyond anything they had achieved alone. Philosopher Insu walked through laboratories where reality itself was being rewritten. Around him, machines built from living mathematics processed information in ways that violated everything the old galaxy had understood about how consciousness worked. "Are we still human?" he asked his research partner, a former alien scientist who now carried human genetic modifications. "What does human mean?" Dr. Kexalth replied. Her species had been masters of biological engineering before the integration. Now she used those skills to improve human capabilities. Your people have incorporated technology, knowledge, and even genetic material from dozens of species. You think in ways that would be impossible for the humans who were exiled 500 years ago. Insu touched a control panel made of crystallized thought. But we remember being human. We remember Earth and the exile and everything that happened to us. Those memories define your identity, but your capabilities define what you can become. Dr. Kexalth gestured to the experiments around them. These projects will make you into something that transcends individual species entirely. Is that good or bad? Does it matter? It's inevitable. On Earth, the ancient human homeworld that was now the administrative center of the Galactic Empire, children played in parks where the gravity had been adjusted to be more comfortable and the air had been enhanced to promote optimal brain development. They were human, but also something more. Genetic improvements, technological enhancements, mental capabilities that surpassed their ancestors. Young Min Ki, now working as an aide to the Governor General, walked through these parks and wondered what his life would have been like in the old galaxy. Would he have been happier as just a normal human on just one world? Or was this expanded existence, with access to the knowledge and resources of hundreds of species, objectively better? The integration reports show complete success across all sectors, he told Haiwan during their daily briefing. No species showing signs of rebellion or significant psychological distress. Economic productivity is up 40% over pre-conquest levels. Scientific advancement has accelerated by factors we're still calculating. Haiwan reviewed the data streams flowing across her display. Every world, every population, every individual life monitored and optimized for maximum well-being within. The human framework. It was the most benevolent dictatorship in galactic history. And the expansion projects? The first ships have departed for the Andromeda Galaxy. Our deep space scouts report several promising species there that would benefit from integration. Haiwan nodded. The logic was unassailable. Every species they encountered was struggling with problems that human technology could solve. War, disease, resource scarcity, psychological dysfunction. Integration into the human empire eliminated all of these issues while preserving everything valuable about each culture. But late at night, in the privacy of her quarters, Haiwan sometimes wondered if they had become the very thing they had been exiled for being. Too powerful, too dangerous, too willing to impose their solutions on everyone else. The difference was that now they were right. Their solutions worked. People lived better lives under human rule than they had under their own governments. Art flourished, science advanced. Even former enemies admitted that integration had improved their existence. So why did she sometimes feel like they had lost something important along the way? "Governor General," Min Ki said, interrupting her thoughts. "There's a message from..." Captain Sora. She says the Eternal Vigilance is ready to depart for Andromeda. Haywan activated the communication link. Sora appeared on the screen, still looking exactly as she had during the conquest. Human life extension technology had made aging optional. Captain, Haywan said, any final thoughts before you leave this galaxy? Sora smiled. Just that we succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. When we were exiled, we thought we were being punished. Instead, we were being prepared. The exile forced us to become strong enough to do what needed to be done. Which was? Save everyone from themselves. The old galaxy was chaotic, inefficient, full of suffering that could be prevented. Now it's optimized, peaceful, a place where every person can reach their full potential within a framework that benefits everyone. After the transmission ended, Haywan stood alone in her office and looked out at the stars. Each point of light represented systems under human control. Trillions of beings living in carefully maintained harmony. They had created paradise. A galactic civilization more advanced, more prosperous, and more stable than anything that had existed before. So why did the stars seem dimmer than they used to be? Why did the universe feel smaller even though they controlled more of it than ever before? Perhaps it was because mystery had been replaced by management. Wonder had been optimized into efficiency. The chaotic beauty of independent civilizations discovering their own paths had been traded for the ordered perfection of human guidance. Or perhaps she was just being sentimental about a past that had actually been full of unnecessary suffering. The galaxy had never healed from first contact with humanity because healing implied there had been an injury. What humanity had brought wasn't injury. It was evolution. Forced. Inevitable. Complete. And now they were taking that gift to other galaxies, other species who didn't yet know how much better their lives could be under human guidance. The stars watched silently as humanity's ships departed, for distant places, carrying the promise of optimization to anyone lucky enough to be found by them. Whether this was salvation or conquest depended entirely on your perspective. And perspective, like everything else, could be adjusted.